This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Confronting the Line, where we come to the line to explore, is something transformational or is it exploitive? Is it helpful? Is it harmful? And we're starting to, mostly looking in organizations, multi-like high control groups and so on, but I'm starting to branch out because I'm discovering that this phenomenon is everywhere and in almost every kind of group. Today, I'm excited to have a guest with me who I met a while ago when I found out about a project, her and her partner. I think I heard about you guys listening on some other podcast where you and Dave, so this is Cara Cordone, everybody. I'll have her introduce herself in a minute, but I really got to know about you when you guys took on trying to reform the organization that you were a part of, trying to make a difference. And I have so many people say that to me about Landmark, well, you just didn't talk to people who could do something about it. You just didn't give them a chance to da-da-da-da-da, which is all bullshit. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But I was so resonated with you and Dave because, when you first realize something's not right here, you want to fix it. Especially if it's something that you love and you feel like has made a difference for you and others, you just want to fix it. And finding out that you can't fix it is heartbreak number one. And then there's about 6 or 7 after that. So Cara, why don't you tell for our listeners just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive in. We're going to start with this trying to reform them, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah. So like you said, I'm Cara Cordone. I have launched my own podcast. So we're going to cross share called Fool's Gold, Discernment in the Age of Grift. And I think you might have met Dave and I through our appearance on Chris Shelton's.
I think that was it. You're right.
That might have been. And that's Dave Buddha and myself and Lalita Diaz. We formed a group called Safer, Sex Positive, and Spiritual Communities, which is the group through which we attempted to reform the organization. In this case, it's ISTA, or the International School of Temple Arts, is the group that we tried to fix. And so a little on my backstory there, I attended my first ISTA retreat right after during COVID. So I'd been on lockdown with a problematic alcoholic boyfriend, did that relationship January 1st, 2021. And I had that vulnerability where I was like, oh, I want to go and expand my emotional and sexual intimacy skills. I can see I've made all these mistakes. I found a really cool class online, very legitimate.
You're so
very
brave.
Science.
I made my husband and I had a whole revolution during the pandemic also, but the far as I got was I made him listen to the Audible of David Data's book, Intimate Companion.
There's some questions there too.
Yes,
we could look back on. So the class was really solid, very academically founded, but there were all these participants. And so there were chats and breakout groups, and someone threw down the gauntlet. Oh, people should look into ISTA. ISTA's amazing. If you like this, go look at ISTA. And I jumped, took a look at the retreat, sexual, shamanic, spiritual experience. And I was like, this looks edgy and crazy and fun. And they're going to be in my neighborhood. They're going to be holding this retreat 3 hours from my house. These retreats are held all over the world. So the fact that there was one here in California, I'm in Northern California, hit up my best friend. She was like, this is crazy. Let's do it. And so we went in April of 2021.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Right in the middle of the pandemic, man. That was when I shut down my event business and everything. Of course, I was in the midst of my own crisis.
They were kind of reopening and we did testing, and there were questions about that safety because there was the magical thinking that so many new age groups that our vibration is too high for us to get a virus. But they also knew not everyone was there. So there was some testing, but it was sketchy. There's no doubt. But there was 70 of us that showed up.
Wow.
I mean, the pent-up demand was huge to connect, to do the transformation, right? They really market healing, transformation, empowerment, community. Those are all the hot topic buttons. And I mean, I left high as a kite. I had the microphone. This is amazing. This is a dream come true. This is, everything. And so we left. I was super hypomanic, verging on manic, and signed up for the next one immediately and already put myself on the path of climbing the ladder. So
Okay.
I was like, these facilitators, they do groups of 3 facilitators. And I was like, these facilitators sit on the fancy couch and they have all these assistants that support them. And basically, they travel the world, having sex with who they want, getting paid bank, and healing the world by reducing sexual shame. I'm in. How do I do that? And so I signed up for my next retreat 6 months later, and I signed up as an assistant because in order to become like an apprentice or a facilitator, you do assisting first, where you pay to come and work. You pay
Oh my gosh.
slightly.
Landmark is so proud that they've moved to this model. So great. I just love to capture that for a sec because I think you're pretty familiar with Landmark as I recall.
Yeah.
Volunteers and ran really on volunteer labor. And you had to volunteer. All the beginning leadership training is all volunteer roles, right? And you're running the programs, you're doing production, you're doing all this stuff and you're learning. And to be very honest, I actually loved it. I loved volunteering for that. I loved the mood of it. I loved everything about it except for the no money part, but I already had no money. So it wasn't like new for me. So like whatever. So at least now I'm making a difference with no money. So rather than, suffering. So anyway, and then in September of 2023, they ended their assisting program after a lawsuit. And finally, somebody filed a suit and they were going to have to go to trial and defend it. And they knew they weren't going to be able to defend it because they'd already had the Department of Labor had done a couple of raids, so to speak, and issued these opinions that they were indeed they were in violation of US labor laws. Because of how their program was structured, it is actually in the United States legal to have volunteers in a for-profit company. So it's not just not for profit that's the line. It's actually what you're having them do, how you're interacting with them like that.
Right.
But now, so as soon as they did that, they're like, yay, we're going to turn these into training programs. And now you can pay. And they did these announcements. I wasn't on one, but I had like a couple dozen people call me and tell me about them. But it was hilarious because a few people kind of caught on. They're like, wait, so you're now telling us that we can pay? And it was low. It was a few $100s. It wasn't really expensive. We can now pay for what I've been volunteering to do in exchange for training. That's the exchange, that you're going to volunteer and you're going to get all this great training, right? Which is kind of true, but it was so funny because you're going to pay. So now they're all leadership academies. Like they basically took those programs and then turned them and then you pay some kind of nominal fee, but you're still giving way more labor, way more resource, way more, you're giving way more than you're getting. I mean, they convince you that you're getting a lot and you are getting something.
Right.
But it's not an even exchange. Like it's not an equitable exchange. And then when I worked for Yoga Man, who I talk about in my book, but that was his big thing, he would have people paid to train. Now, at least he really was training them how to actually assist people in yoga poses. Like it was a marketable skill that was relevant to them. So to me, it had a little bit more legitimacy than the Landmark world, but and then he didn't run around like Landmark and try to suppress you if you actually tried to use your training. So Landmark actually threatens to sue you if you try to actually use the training they trained you in. If you use it on anything even remotely like their business, any kind of coaching, facilitation, seminars, like you can't use it on that. If you want to use it on like a
Interesting.
lawn mowing company, okay, fine. But nothing that's anywhere in their realm, they'll threaten you. So anyway, so it's just like
That's
this whole
interesting.
lineage of volunteerism that's quite mixed into these groups a lot. That's
It
very
is. And I mean, ISTA is pretty brilliant to say, hey, pay 2/3 or pay 3/4 of a regular participant
mhm,
because you're still a participant, but you're working and you're reporting out on the well-being of people in the pod you're holding. So you're, gathering information, keeping a pulse, you're reporting out, you're setting up the room, you're taking the room down, you're holding time, you're cleaning, you're prepping. I mean, the amount of work, and then to look and be like, an ISTA course is between $2,000 and $3,000, like
gotcha.
$2,500. And I still paid 1700 or something to go work it. But I knew that that's how you get in the inner circle, is that you
Gotcha.
start showing up. And the more you're an assistant, even as a participant, I don't think I knew assistants paid to be there. I just knew they were deeper in and holding. And ISTA talks about, the assistants transmit the culture. And that's because, like, you're kind of the fluffers, you're kind of
Right.
the like demos and
You
the
got to be the
cheerleaders.
example. Yoga
Yeah.
Man had this hilarious thing because I then worked in a lot of his teams and I was coaching him and doing content work for him. But anyway, it was hilarious that when the first time I'm working with them, they had this whole thing. I'm like, I sit down when you bring me into a group. The first thing I do is sit down and just invite everybody to talk. What do you want me to know? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they had this whole thing that if they got reactivated or they had to cry, they had to go to this closet. It was hilarious. It was actually like a little storage room, but they would have to be out of sight. So if they were anything other than like full of possibility and, a demonstration of the opportunities and possibilities of that work, they had to be hidden. And I said, that's weird, guys. Like, that's weird. It's actually weird even for transformation because I came from the landmark world where it takes breakdown to get to breakthrough. So the crying and that's all part of the process. And the more authentic and real you can bring your confront to the show, like the more real you are, right?
Yeah. And that's a little bit more the ISTA direction, in that a lot of the workshop, it's set up by a set of agreements, and we can talk about how that's immediately part of the indoctrination, containment, education part. And then the other major foundation are what they call the 7 emotional release tools. And so you spend many hours initially learning that anything that comes up for you in this space, we request that you don't use things that have worked for you. We request that you use these 7 tools. And they are like hand screaming, tantruming, either on your back on the floor or standing up, but very activating, right? Things
Okay.
that get our nervous system way out of control. The one that was very confronting is what they call pillow thrusting or pillow fucking, where you put the pillow down and you're doing what it sounds like while crying and screaming or.
Wow.
So I remember, they use all of the amazing loud emotional music, just like a Tony Robbins or any of these where you create emotional states through that. And you're in a room literally of 70 people who are crying and screaming and tantruming and wailing. And because I am kind of the nature, the theater background, I like to commit and go get it. I'm a
Huh.
bit type A student, where I'm like, oh, if I try harder, I'll be in. Didn't really understand a lot of that about myself at the time, but in the
Sure.
deconstruction. And I was like, oh, took off the brakes and was like, I trust you. I am going to do 2 hours of crying, screaming, rotating, and the chemical experience, the cascade. I was high as a kite. I was like, this is amazing, and out of my critical or prefrontal, just completely in the body and the emotion.
Wow. Yeah, that's like scary. I can see why I never went for anything like that. But because I'm like Miss Chicken Girl. But there's something I've since learned about when we create an intense experience, right? Emotional, physical, but physiological. We create
Psychological.
psychological, create an intense experience and then attach a dialogue or a meaning or a story or a narrative to it. In Landmark, they would call that discovering for yourself kind of learning. But folks, as I've studied neuroscience, it's very much a physiological thing, an intense experience, and you tie that experience to some kind of mental construct or understanding. So in Landmark world, it's like, you're transformed, you're transforming, right? Like, and when I was hosting the Being a Leader course, right, which I did following my Landmark thing, I think I have somewhere around 50 or 60 interviews with people during the course, just trying to get testimonials that I could use on the websites for the next one, right?
Right.
I think I only ever had 3 that were useful, 3 or maybe 4, because people would say, I'm transformed. I'm being a leader. They'd be regurgitating the language and you go, okay, but what does that mean? Like, how are you going to put that to action in your business, in your life? And almost never could they connect it. Now
I love that.
they were in the middle of it. Sometimes later
Right.
down the road, they could connect some things because that's what we do as human beings, right? And we go
Yes.
out
We
and
make meaning and yes.
like my transformed means XYZ, but it's to the group's benefit
Right.
to tie it to this extreme emotional experience. It's not actually healthy for almost anybody, as I understand it.
No, I read a Substack today that was really breaking down the misinformation out of like Gestalt therapy, late 60s, and this
Mhm.
idea of the primal scream. So we can really tie it back, right, to
Right.
that. And then that has, scattered into these other forms. But, the idea, the thesis was we need to re experience the intensity of the trauma in order to move through it on a new pathway. And people were like, cool, sounds reasonable. Why not? And so,
While they re-traumatize themselves.
and that's actually what it is. And
Yeah.
that's what all the
Yeah.
research shows.
Exactly. Yeah, we
Whether
now
it's this
know that's not
rage
a safe thing.
therapy, but it's popping off on TikTok and all the places again. Women are angry. Women are having rage labs. And it's like, okay, we get it. We are angry. But isn't this just a misdirection in a way that actually harms us? And it misses the point of what is the point of rage? It is to find the appropriate right action. It
Yeah.
is what are we going to do in the world now that we have both the emotional content, but then we've had critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
And that piece, there is no critical thinking. It ends up just like a lot of emotion and then re-traumatization.
Mm.
And what they talk about is the real risk, especially when you repeat it, as you and I know, is that you create the neural pathways that make it easier to repeat it. So if you
Right.
practice rage, you get better at rage. You do not get better at self-regulating, which is the unsexy work. And I recognized when I
Mm.
got attracted to ISTA, man, it's very sexy work, sexual, shamanic,
Yeah.
spiritual, edgy, crazy. If they had been like deep healing through gentle, static, yes, I would have been like, I don't know. I
Sounds
want
boring.
something. Exactly. And so I think this trick or this issue we have where it's like, yeah, when we have unrecognized trauma, when we're not good at being in a regulated state, we are often attracted to things that are not good for us. And then, of course, they're marketing it and manipulating because they don't have our best interest at heart either.
Mm-mm.
Most of them, when there are, of course, like, there's so many lovely people that get sucked in to
Yeah.
these organizations. But as you adopt their doctrine and you continue, and because we tried to reform them, you realize, no, they don't have our best interest at heart. This is money. This is a business.
So, oh my gosh, so many rabbit holes to go down, but I'm going to try and stay focused. So,
Yeah.
so there you go in and you do the programs. You
Yeah.
kind of sounds like a little bit like me. Like I
I
did the
loved
forum and
it.
then the advanced course, and
Yeah.
I did the forum in February. By September, I'm in the leadership training program. Like, so you're kind
Yeah.
of all in. So before we get to how you tried to reform them,
Yeah.
what started to actually go from this like high and this amazing experience to something's not right here? Like, what were some of those
Yeah.
early signs like?
I mean, of course, in retrospect, I can look back and I see many red and yellow flags.
Right. Ditto.
But there was a specific outside incident that made me aware of that because I was pretty bought into the personal responsibility framework. Right. I am responsible for the nature of my experience. I am responsible for everything in the world that ever happens to me. So I was very much, going through. So I did the first retreat. I did the second was as an assistant, worked my ass off, actually injured myself, got really put down by one of the facilitators.
Mm,
But I took it was very Darvo.
yeah.
I think both our audiences know Darvo, but yeah, I
If not,
raised
folks, look it up.
concerns.
Just Google it. It's worth
Yeah.
learning about. I'll write an article about it sometime soon, but yeah.
Yeah. So I had raised concerns in a feedback session where they said, please raise concerns. And I was like, I'll be brave and say what I truly believe because I'm sovereign and adult. And the response I got was, that's all your issues. Can't you see how you're making us a perpetrator when you're really the perpetrator against yourself. And I collapsed. I was like, oh my God, you're right. I'm
'Cause you'd
horrible. My
already
life's a
gotten the
mess.
responsibility bug. So,
Yes.
those that follow me know I've been on a bit of a rampage against the responsibility misnomers and the whole
Yes.
self-help work. Because there's not a single group that doesn't use it. This
No.
idea that, and yes, is it the case that what we have dominion over is, well, even I don't even know if that's true, that we have dominion over how we perceive things? Kind of, sort of,
Yeah.
not really. Like, we have some agency, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But that gets just extrapolated into this whole thing about,
I always
you're
tell
responsible for
people
your experience.
who are, and I mean, I found it by myself at 15. So at 15, I was raped. I told a friend. She was like, well, is that really rape? Is it date rape? Is it this? And I came to the decision that no, it's all my responsibility. If I had not done this or worn that or said, hey, can we go see the stars? Then it wouldn't have happened. And that gave me, what it really gives us is a false sense of control.
Exactly. That's why it's false power, because it's a false sense of control. And it has this, like, it layers on this little thing of, well, like, it makes it okay temporarily. But the
Yeah.
impacts of whatever was perpetrated on you, whatever victimization you experienced, the
Yeah.
actual deep emotional, spiritual, physical impacts of that don't get addressed. They get buried. That's why I'm
Right.
like super against it. Like, no, 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 no.
It's
You
interesting you say that. I wonder if it's almost, I mean, I guess there's a quality that it's kind of self shaming. And so the shame
Mhm.
gets pushed because it's your fault. You're responsible, but and therefore we don't really heal it. We're like, I just need to make better decisions going forward.
Well, I think it's that combination. I mean, there's definitely shame in the I had a similar thing. I had somebody who basically stalked me, and then, somebody else called the police on this person. He was, basically preying on people in the landmark leadership courses where I was. I remember a police officer coming over and saying, "Were you raped? Were you raped?" And I was like, "No." And you could almost feel the guy was trying so hard to get me to say yes, but I was a brand new leader who had really discovered 100% responsibility. So I'm like, "Well, no," because at a certain point, the truth is I said yes, because I thought if I said yes and let him, he'd go away, which, ladies, doesn't work that way. So, but I was 30,
Yeah.
just out of a bad marriage, kind of like in my sort of like, well, they can screw whoever they want, so can I, like, whatever.
Right. Right.
I was all in the state, so I couldn't say to this police officer with integrity, which is another, big weaponized idea, that he raped me. Like, I wasn't comfortable putting that word to what had happened. So I said no, he ended up getting, because some other women were like, yeah. Anyway, and so he got banished and what, I don't think he ever went to jail, but he definitely got banished from the whole Landmark lexicon and whatnot. And Landmark redid all their sexual harassment policies. And I mean, I still think they handled that pretty well for an organization, especially as I've heard how they've handled some other things was not nearly that well. But it wasn't until the Me Too movement. Fast forward to Me Too, which was what? That was also the 2019, 2020-ish time,
Right.
something like that.
A little earlier.
A
Yeah.
little bit earlier. And I had just started this women's group, and we have these Fridays. They're still going. It's like 6, 7 years every Friday at 2:00. It's an open session for women to just come talk. We call it a women's circle salon now. And we were just talking about it, and it's like the whole thing came up. The shame, the
Yeah.
embarrassment, the pain, the invasion, like being invaded by something I didn't really want. Like, it was really in that, and that I realized, whoa, no, that was really wrong what he did. That was really wrong. And then I was able to, like, release the whole thing. But before, I mean, just kind of like let it go, just like,
Right.
wow,
Right.
sort of integrate it and let it go. And that's when I felt the more sovereign kind of power, like, oh yeah, being able to say that that person victimized me had way
Right.
more strength in my own internal experience than having all these explanations for why I was responsible and why, I said yes, so he couldn't really be blamed and yada, yada, yada.
Right.
Like, I mean, we've been trained to gaslight ourselves, and especially
My first
women.
language, children. Look at how much children, all of us in the
Yes.
culture are gaslit. And then some of us too. I'm like, gaslighting is like my first language.
Yeah.
I do it. I've had to like learn new languages, right?
Yeah.
And so we immediately gaslight
Yeah,
ourselves.
it's
And
like, "That didn't it didn't really happen, this other thing happened," or, "Let
in
me
an
give it."
effort
Yeah,
to comfort and to find relief and to find safety
yeah,
again, right? I mean,
yeah,
it makes so much sense that, thinking from the neurological and the neuroscience, it's like we are seeking homeostasis. We
mhm,
are, and that's not just, I think in the last 2 years, what's open for me, it's not just my body is going to do fight, flight, and that. It's looking at the work of our mutual friend, John Hunter, and
yes,
looking at, okay, when we understand an LGAT, large group awareness training, and we understand that there, at least the hypothesis, right, is that we have psychological defense mechanisms and that they get activated by these high stress, high emotion. And so understanding that my affect, that the transformation that I had of being so confident and outspoken and fearless, and well, that was my psychological defense mechanism in order to get me through and out of that kind of
that
pressure.
situation, yeah.
And then it's sold as, right, because you're confident and decisive, and will you sign up for the next course? And people like this never hesitate. We're looking for people who don't hesitate, or, different little proddings and manipulations that again, like you said, attaching my experience of transformation to this idea that now I'm sovereign and I want to keep feeling this way. And this is evidence, when it's really a normal human experience to have that kind of variety.
Well, and it's such a good sales loop. So this is for all, like, since I wrote my book, one of the most gratifying things is the number of people that come to me and go, "Oh my God, it wasn't my fault." Because what you're describing right now is exactly the linchpin for that. Folks, if you did a program, large group awareness training, which is not, the title is a little bit unfortunate because it doesn't happen just in large groups, and the large group isn't you can have very healthy large
Right.
groups that don't have this kind of experience. But it's what happens then 2 weeks down the road, 3 weeks down the road when all that buzz starts to wear off, and then those feelings, whatever those feelings are, it comes back, like the old you emerges, and you think, "It didn't work. Well, I'll go do some more." Because that's always their answer. Just come do some more,
Exactly.
stay enrolled, like whatever. Do some more. And then, or get involved, take on an accountability, volunteer, what these groups have unlimited opportunities. And it is true. If you stay involved, you stay more towards the high. It's once you're away and then you notice, like, wait, that transformation, like, might not be so permanent, right? Like it might, and then people tend to internalize that they did it wrong. Something is, and of course that's how you're coached.
Absolutely.
So it's like, oh, it just didn't work on me. Or
For
sometimes
us,
maybe you'll go try something else or whatever, but it's,
right.
my friend Tony calls it chasing the dragon, right? Like very deliberate,
Absolutely.
like,
Just like any direct addiction where
mhm.
we're like, oh, I felt better in that place. How do I go get it?
Yeah. So what I want people to know is, folks, when you understand the neuroscience of what's going on, when you understand the layout of these programs, the way we can now, that I will give some credit to, we didn't always know this, but now we do know the program's designed to fail, kind of. It really
Right.
is,
And
so
that
that you'll
does
keep coming
lead
back.
to why they can't be reformed, because those of us that come in and we think we see where it's broken, it's having these negative impacts. Let's go back to the organization and say, how do we fix these negative impacts? And then you realize, oh no, those are not bugs, honey. Those are features. That is working exactly as designed. They won't necessarily say that out loud,
Right.
but it is working exactly as designed. And so for me, I went every 6 months for 3 retreats. And in
Okay.
between, I had group chats. And their big thing in between is, are you practicing the emotional release skills? So the idea is every day you're crying, screaming, tantruming, wailing, basically keeping yourself in a state of dysregulation. And in the assistant guide, that they didn't have it at the time I went, but I've recently reviewed it. They literally say, like, have you prepared by doing your emotional release every day? Are you? And so that it's like they're really attached to the way forward
Yeah.
is this gestalt cathartic.
Landmark has a similar thing because they call it the distinctions. They call their technology distinctions, which is a misuse of that word, folks. Look it up. But It's the same thing. Are you identifying your rackets? Are like the ideas, the distinctions that you're introduced to become a kind of doctrine. And then you get trained by habit or by participation, social acceptance, whatever, but you just keep going to those tools, those tools, those tools.
Yeah.
And even if those tools have some validity and have some use, the overuse of them is not good, because what starts to happen is I love that you have a number. There's 7. Landmark has, they don't have it quite identified that way, but it's probably in that neighborhood, 10, 12, like key tools, key ideas. And you got to keep going to those ones. Here's kind of how the messaging goes is they fit everything because they're
Right.
at the source of, they're at the bottom of the design of human being. So the
Right.
implication is that, and Werner is the god in that circle, but even if people don't know who that is, like when I came in, he had been erased, but it's still, he like somehow had the keys to the design of human being. Like he
Right.
took all this other work. Now they finally stopped saying they were his original ideas because it just can't float water. Now it's like, no, he took all these other ideas and he put them together in a unique way. Well, kinda. I mean, he did kinda do that, but the ways he put them together aren't always healthy. They aren't sound. They're leaving out a bunch of stuff. But the bottom line is no single set of tools are going to work for everything all of the time. And that's
Like any
what
tool,
gets
we can
lived.
use it well and we can misuse it, right? I can use
Exactly.
a screwdriver to put a thing together. I can jab someone's eye out. It's
Yep.
still a screwdriver. And so for me, like there's no nuance or, transparency in saying like, hey, we're going to propose this concept of responsibility. And the reason we're doing that is we do get stuck often where we feel we have no agency, we blame everyone, right? And that's one place where maybe we're not taking any. And then there's this other place where we take too much. You don't control what someone else did. You can actually be a victim of bad behavior. You are a victim of rape. When they collapse the two is when we get our brains scrambled.
Yeah.
Because as we know, right, if you're responsible for everything, no one can abuse you from the outside, so there's no abusers. Well, that's
Right.
great for abusers. They disappear. They're
Love
like,
it.
no, I get to do what I want. Great. No
Well,
problem.
have you seen the DeMartini stuff going around about how he was on somebody's podcast who totally called him out anyway? But he's this whole thing about essentially there is no right, wrong. There is no good, bad. There is no, like it's all interpretation and it's all a matter of your values and what you value. So if you value, whatever, like forceful sex or whatever, raping people, well, who's to say that's wrong? And then there's all the consent nonsense and like how all these things get turned and twisted. But I love this question. I can't remember where the source of it is, but who benefits? So like I always ask, it's like, okay, wait, who is benefiting from this?
Right.
And I even do that now with Facebook memes because there's so much misinformation and insanity out there. But I'm like, wait, who's benefiting from this perspective even?
Right.
Maybe they're not benefiting financially. There's a direct line to like somebody's putting money in their pockets, right? But who's benefiting? Is it people that are out to make a difference in society, serve the greater good? Or is there some interest out there that's interested in me being upset right now? Because this is clearly designed to upset me, or evoke some kind of strong emotional reaction. If somebody's trying to get a strong emotional reaction from you folks, somebody who's not you is benefiting, in my view. So, and that's fun, in our case, like who benefits a lot from these large group awareness trainings and these intense emotional experiences is the group that's offering them, because that is their product. Their product is just like the guy who runs the roller coaster at the thing, but that's that's a more even exchange because like I'm going on the roller coaster to have the crap scared out of me. Right. And so that's the deal, and you sign up for it. And then
But you also sign up that is a safe roller coaster.
Yes.
You have an agreement that they knew how to build a roller coaster, they know how to operate a roller coaster, and you are not going to die or be hurt on that roller coaster.
Yeah, notice, folks, you don't have to sign an NDA or a release form when getting on a roller coaster. There's regulations, there's all of this stuff that is in place that is not in place in the self-help, personal development, or wellness industries.
Exactly.
At all. There's a tiny bit in wellness, but not very much. Okay, so let's go back to... So
It
what? Oh yeah,
links directly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
So I
go.
have the link. I've got the
Yeah, yeah.
thread.
Okay.
So the thread is back to what you said, where there's this equivalency or this erasure of good, bad. So after I did level 1 as an assistant, ISTA doesn't have that many levels. A lot of people repeat level 1 and assist there. Then they had level 2. So level 1 is like, oh, I'm going to do my personal healing around sex and relating. It's very much from my direct personal experience. They sell it as like, this is the sex ed you wished you'd had in high school or college. And there are, of course, really valuable exercises and pieces in there, but they
There's always
get
value. It
overwhelmed.
wouldn't work
There's
if there's
always
no value.
value. And
Yeah.
that, like, we just say that, yes, we know there is value. If it was all bad, no one would do it. If it was
Right.
all,
Right.
there are things to keep. Level 2 is transpersonal. So are you now not working with your persona? We're going to work with the archetype of the divine feminine, the light feminine, the dark feminine, and then you get into polarity stuff in a big way. I'm not going to go there, but just, and ultimately, though, it is as a soul, the soul has no preferences. The soul, and especially as a woman, like if we're going to embody pure love and the goddess, well, do you really know that you don't like that? Or is that just something you've picked up along the way? And so it erases preferences, it erases all of that primarily to get women to spread their legs for men. I mean, that's honestly
Wow. Right.
because you got to understand we're combining large group awareness training with sex. Like
Yeah.
this isn't just the large group awareness. We've got the whole what happens to our psychology and biology when we're in these
Right.
sex confronting opportunities, like super confusing, and have a whole question about, is consent possible in a large group awareness training of that nature? It gets real dicey, real dicey. So level 2, you've got everybody who's already been to level 1. So it's more insiders. You've got fewer offerings of it. So like all the big kids, the deep in ones show up because it's like a way to party and be all together
Mhm.
and have your orgy or sex or whatever
Right.
games, which is fine if they were honest about it, right? But
Yeah.
that's not what's the honest part. So level 2 is death and rebirth. And it's a mystery school, so many things are not revealed to us until you've already paid your money, showed
Right.
up. And then, for example, we're going to slaughter an animal. And that is because you Americans and you Westerners are disconnected from the death of the animals you eat. Most of you eat meat, but you never slaughter an animal. You don't even call it the same thing, pig, pork. And you're like, yeah, that's true. I mean, I was like,
Again, there's just enough truth in there to kind of
to hook
keep
you.
you on the path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm not scared of that. Well, it wasn't until reflection when I took a step out and I'm like, okay, this is like a spiritual ritual situation. We're talking, these are rituals. They call them rituals, but they refuse to call it an animal sacrifice ritual, which is what it is. I'm like, the illusion is over here. You're scared of owning that. But really, what you're doing is like a blood ritual to open the underworld, to take people into this death journey. And in that death journey in the underworld, there's no preferences. And the center of all things is the black hole or the void. And in that, you are
Now
pure.
you're into the early Aleister Crowley, which is the sort of foundations. L. Ron, our friend over in
There,
Scientology, and
yes.
they look up Aleister Crowley, scary stuff. John Atack's recent
Well, and
book about
I
it.
just
You did-
released an episode with John,
yeah,
and it
John.
is about theosophy
Yeah,
to Scientology to Neo Tantra. So there's more to unpack there, but it goes back to Alice Bailey. It goes back to Blavatsky, which is all theosophy.
right.
And nobody understands, like, we actually do have a lineage here and it's pretty gross.
Yeah,
Like you want to
yeah.
question it.
Well, that's one of the other things I tell people a lot is take the time to understand the foundations. I
I
never,
do.
right? I came into Landmark, for example, when Warner had been erased, right? Because of all the things that
Yeah.
happened in the 90s and all the bad press that came out and the accusations from his daughters and his employees that came out and said, oh, by the way, he's abusive and all this. And I never really paid any attention to that because he was gone. Like, that didn't have any,
That's how
you
I
know.
was with Dez. I was like, "Oh, he
No,
founded it, but he's not there anymore." But then you're not thinking about, well, but isn't it important to understand who created the system and put the ball in motion?
especially if they've never really moved from that. Like, I'm building a house
Yeah.
right now, so look, when you put the foundation in, you can put some weird additions
Yes.
on and kinda go
Right.
higher and kinda do some kinda funky stuff that looks different, but if you don't actually question the foundation, you can't actually
Yeah.
change anything, and you
Right.
can't really build anything new. You have to that
Yes.
foundation has to go,
Right.
or at least come under question or evolution.
Yeah.
So you started to, like, realize something sorta weird, 'cause I wanna get into this thing about how you guys tried to change it, 'cause you're
Yeah.
literally one of the only other
So
people I've ever talked to who talks about
oh,
that
yeah.
publicly, like, what you did to
Yeah.
try and change it.
So I got through level 2, thought it was amazing, was kind of falling apart, but didn't really recognize the ways I was falling apart because I
Mm,
thought it was all part of the transformation. And so I got out in April 2022, and June 2022, I saw a Facebook post by one of these facilitators that said, "I know there's some upset people, and I understand they formed a group here on Facebook." And then she was very vague. It wasn't clear what her message was. So I'm curious, and I'm like, "Oh, let me go see. And maybe I can make things better." I was immediately in the like, "I'll be a bridge because I'm a new member." And so I joined the Facebook group, very optimistic. And then very quickly that group grew from, I think I was like in the top first 30 or 60. And by October, we had 600 members.
wow.
And then the group broke down because we couldn't protect confidentiality, right? Like it got on
Yeah.
fire. But in that process, I was like, "Oh no, these are reports of harm that go back 10 years. These are reports of harm that not only go back 10 years, but have been victim blamed, dismissed, shunned. Like there's no accountability, there's no method for repair, there's no appetite for it." And so I then was like, this isn't what I thought it was. And I shared my experience with Darvo, which even writing that, I was like, you guys, I think I'm breaking rules because I'm gossiping. I'm not talking
Oh,
directly to
yeah.
the person, I'm talking to you. And that's a rule.
Okay, now there's some
And I'm
that's a big thing in landmark gossip is talking to somebody other than the person who could do something about it, which has so many things wrong with it. We need a whole other
exactly
episode just on gossip. Like
right.
no, gossip is who does gossip, not gossiping rules. Again, who benefits? If you really examine
Absolutely.
it, it's almost always whoever the power position is. It's the boss, it's the
Absolutely.
organization, it's the predator. That is who it benefits. Now, that's different than saying mean things about my friend,
Right.
to just be mean, right? And that's what
Starting
I say to people
rumors
is
or
like,
having
don't
yeah.
even call that gossip. Just like, God, I
It's
was saying
not. It's
mean
a
things about my,
misuse of the word.
yeah,
If you're like, "Well, I wanna discuss this with someone," and they categorize everything where you discuss it where that person is there is gossip. That is inaccurate. That is a misuse of the word. And like you said, it collapses. So I wrote this whole preamble. I feel like I'm gossiping and blah, 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 but I'm going to say it anyway. And I spelled it out. And one of the people came back and was like, "Darling, that's classic Darvo." So when I learned about Darvo in that context, that's what pulled the carpet out from under me because I still held the frame. Well, I wasn't raped. I wasn't sexually assaulted. I wasn't really harmed. I got through it okay. And then it wasn't until that I started to having to actually deconstruct like,
mm,
no, no, I didn't. My brain is full of garbage. I have misunderstandings I'm living by that I don't even know how to get to them
yeah.
because I've absorbed them and I've baked them into my already well developed ability to self gaslight. So I had, to start pulling that all apart. And so I went into like major depression, but I also, in that depression hypomania, became incredibly motivated to try to help solve it. So I was channeling my,
Yeah.
we'll make it better. And so
When I
what
wrote
we
my book,
did,
I thought I was
yeah.
helping Landmark. Like,
Yes.
honestly,
All
I did.
right.
I mean, they would have major arguments against this, but
I
I'm
get it.
telling you I was because
Yes.
I had done well, first, I had just been a part of 3 years of trying to talk to the people. At least I was supporting the people who were actually being harmed, so I wasn't directly being harmed. People who were being
Yeah.
harmed came to me for help. I was supporting them. They did. Folks, let me just clear something up. So many people say to me, well, why didn't you? That we did. I just look at people and I go, you kind of know me. You know how high in that organization I was, how much of my life was entangled there. You really think I just came out and wrote a book without having spent years trying to get it resolved? So
Right.
letters to Harry, conversations, confidential, all kinds of, there was a small group that was really trying to just make the abuse stop and have Warner
Yeah.
give back the money he
Right.
allegedly stole. So that was it. They just wanted an
Yeah.
apology and they wanted money that they felt was sort of rightfully they had earned to be given back. That was it. That was it. And we
And
just, the most basic thing, and we could not get it done. And then Landmark, because they were in deep trouble from the pandemics, all of a sudden their website was like 50 years, the lineage of S. They started retying themselves to the whole Werner thing. Werner had gotten back involved, was like working in the
right.
daily operations, coaching forum leaders. And I was like, no, you guys. And I knew these court cases were going to be coming and I knew it was going to all come out. And so I was like, I'm just going to share my experience so that when it does come out, people have had some forewarning. Because I just went through 3
Yeah.
years of, just trying to even understand what was happening. And so I was like, I'm warning. And there's a challenge in the end of my book. Like, I challenge you guys to actually join the safe seeking movement, become a leader in that field, evaluate yourself, look at yourself now. And then everything that happened after my book, which is finding out about how all that was incredibly naive.
I
Totally
know.
not. That was where I thought it was a bug that lived just in the little Werner circles.
Exactly.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize that bug had been a feature. I also didn't know really the other part that I didn't assess then, but I'm deep into assessing now, is it all came out before. It came out in the 90s. There was a 60 Minutes special. There was a Outrageous Betrayal. There was a book that outlined, when I read Outrageous Betrayal, which took me 4 months to read because it was so
Like
upsetting,
overwhelming.
because I'm like,
Yeah.
everything in there was very familiar. I didn't have, it wasn't, forget that it's
Right.
incredibly well sourced,
Yeah.
well documented, it's from court cases and depositions under oath and things like that. It was familiar. It was the same stuff that the aides were coming and telling me now. So it wasn't hard for me to believe because I'd already now had 6, 7, 8, 9 people tell me the same story
Right.
that was being written. So all that happens in 1990. It all comes out. He leaves the country, da 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 da. And then they just do a little like shuffle, 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 shuffle. And they
Yep.
water some things down like they do,
Yep.
tone it down a little
Yep.
bit. They never really dealt with it. And now they were recommitting to that legacy.
Yeah.
And I
Look
went,
how amazing, how long we've been around. We must be successful if we've been around this
and he's a
long.
genius, and Scientology just took him down. Like, they have a whole narrative that explains it
Yeah.
away that does not hold water. So it was just like, no, 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 no. So I was trying to warn him. And then anyway, that's just up to my book was trying to warn and call them out. It was like my version of your guys' paper,
It
because we'd
is.
already spent 3 years trying to talk to the powers that be.
Right.
And we're just getting shut down and suppressed. Hey folks, quick note. As you could probably tell, Cara and I talked for a long time, and we could talk a lot longer, but I've decided to cut this session into 2 so that it's a little bit more digestible in parts, because there's a lot here we're discussing. So we're going to pause right here for this week. And next week, you'll be able to see the second part of our discussion. And hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of Cara. And for sure, go check out her podcast, Fool's Gold. All the links will be in the show notes. I also want to mention really quickly, as I always do, if you or somebody you know just feel like you're grappling with understanding what it was to be a part of groups like this, or maybe even a relationship, because sometimes it's a group of one, but any kind of a high control situation, narcissistic abuse situation, high control or culty group, maybe it's in a workplace or a gym or like me, personal development. But if you feel like you maybe have been at the effect of that, I'd really like to invite you to come and check out our Healthy Healing group that we've got going with Rachel Bernstein. We have it on a low-cost contribution model so that it's accessible for anyone who needs it. But I really do invite you to not try to tackle that all by yourself, to come join a community, be with other people who are deconstructing, exploring, working to understand. So just big shout out for that. And then Also, want to let you know about the new Patreon channel I've launched. And that is in part to create a space and a community where we can really look beyond the line, what we're learning over here on Confronting the Line, but then how do we put it into practice? How do we protect ourselves? How do practitioners do it better, create a more safe and more ethical personal, professional development and wellness space? So that's what the Patreon channel is for, as well as, honestly, folks, whatever's on my mind. Because there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't quite fit here, doesn't quite fit over on Illuminate. So we're going to be using Patreon for that. So check out the Patreon channel, Beyond the Line. There's multiple tiers available. All of them put you in the community and the discussions. So love to see you over there. All right. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. We'll see you next week.